He showed me a photo of my little sister outside her school in Saitama, taken that same day.
My name is Yuki Sato. I'm 28 now. I was in the escort world for a little over a year and a half before I finally left it behind. I grew up in a small town in Saitama. Nothing special, just regular houses, narrow streets, the kind of place where people still leave their bikes unlocked sometimes. My dad worked for a logistics company. My mom stayed home. I was the quiet kid. While other girls were hanging out after school, I was usually at my desk with a pencil and a stack of manga paper, trying to get the eyes right or the folds in a jacket. I loved that feeling when a character finally looked alive on the page. It was the only thing that made me feel like I had something of my own. When I was 14, my dad got transferred. Suddenly, he was gone most weeks, business trips that stretched longer and longer. The house got quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Mom moved around a lot, cleaning things that were already clean, cooking too much food. I'd come home from school and the TV would be on low, just for the sound. We didn't talk about how empty it felt. We just kept going. I still drew every day. Mom somehow managed to keep me in art classes even when money was tight. I didn't know until years later that she was borrowing from relatives to pay for it. She never said a word. She'd just leave the enrollment papers on the table and act like it was nothing. I used to think she just really believed in me. Maybe she did. Or maybe she needed me to have something that felt like a future. By the time I was 18, all I wanted was Tokyo. I wanted to study illustration properly, live in a tiny apartment, stop being the daughter who needed help. I got a job at a manga cafe near Shinjuku. It was perfect for me. Dim lights, quiet customers, the smell of paper and cheap coffee. I'd work the evening shifts, then stay late sketching on the back of receipt paper when it was slow. On weekends, I taught basic drawing classes to beginners at a little studio. Nothing fancy. Just helping people hold a pencil the right way and not be scared of blank pages. I had a small place. One room, a futon, a desk by the window. I'd wake up, make instant coffee, draw for an hour before work if I could. My younger cousin was the only person I really talked to about anything real. She'd come visit sometimes, and we'd sit on the floor eating convenience store sushi, talking about nothing important. I didn't tell her I was starting to worry about rent. Tokyo was expensive even then. The cafe paid okay. The classes paid a little extra, but every month it felt tighter. I still dreamed about becoming an illustrator. I had a folder of characters I'd been developing for years. I used to look at them and think, one day someone's going to pay me to do this full time. I just need to hold on a little longer. I told myself that a lot. Hold on a little longer. Everything will settle. I was 22, then 23, still saying the same thing. The city was loud and bright and full of people who seemed to know exactly where they were going. I kept my head down, kept drawing, kept showing up to work. From the outside, it probably looked fine. Quiet girl with a quiet life. I almost believed it myself. Rent was the first thing that started keeping me up at night. My little place in Tokyo had always been tight, but suddenly the landlord raised it and the cafe hours got cut at the same time. I'd come home after a slow shift, open the fridge, and just stare at the same half-empty shelves. Instant noodles, a couple of eggs, maybe some leftover rice. I started skipping the drawing classes I used to teach on weekends because the studio wanted a higher cut and I couldn't afford the train fare some weeks. That one stung. Those classes were the only time I felt like I was still moving toward something. Mom called more often. Not long conversations, just checking if I was eating, if work was okay. I could hear it in her voice that things weren't great back home either. Dad was still gone most of the time. She'd never say she needed money, but I'd send a little when I could. Then I'd sit on the edge of my futon afterward and do the math again. Rent, train pass, phone bill. The numbers never added up the way I wanted them to. I stopped inviting my cousin over as much. Not because I didn't want to see her, I just didn't want her noticing how thin the walls felt or how quiet I got when she asked about my illustration plans. I'd tell her everything was fine. She'd smile and believe me, or at least pretend to. At night, I'd lie there listening to the city outside and feel this low, steady worry that never really turned off. Like something was slowly leaking out of my life and I couldn't find the hole. I tried picking up extra shifts. I tried cutting every little expense. Nothing stretched far enough. Some mornings I'd wake up already tired, already calculating how many days until the next bill. I still drew when I could, but the pencil felt heavier. The characters in my folder started looking like they belonged to someone who had more time, more space, more hope. I didn't know what was coming next. I just knew the ground under my feet was getting thinner every month. I tried everything I could think of first. I asked the cafe if they had any extra shifts. They didn't. I looked at other part-time jobs, convenience stores, cleaning offices early in the morning, even handing out flyers near the station. Most of them paid less than what I was already making, and the hours didn't fit. I thought about going back to Saitama for a while, just to catch my breath, but the idea of showing up at my mom's door with nothing felt worse than staying. I kept telling myself something would open up. It had to. One night, a girl I knew from the cafe, someone who used to work evenings with me, stayed after closing. We were wiping tables, and she just said it quietly. There was this agency that needed girls for dinners and conversation. Nothing more than that at the start. Just show up, look nice, talk to businessmen, smile. The money was 3 or 4 times what I was making in a week at the cafe. She said a lot of girls did it for a few months and then left. I laughed it off at first, told her I wasn't that kind of person. She didn't push, just shrugged and said the offer was there if things got worse. I went home and tried to forget about it. For 2 weeks, I pretended I had. I sold a few of my better sketches online for almost nothing. I ate less. I stopped sending money to my mom and felt sick every time she asked if I was okay. The rent notice came again. Late fees. I sat on the floor with my phone and calculated every possible way to stretch another month. There wasn't one. The shame was the loudest part. I kept thinking about the girl who still drew manga characters in her notebook and believed she'd make it. I didn't want to be the person who said yes to something like that, but the fear of calling my mom and admitting I couldn't keep my own roof over my head was stronger. I told myself it would only be temporary. Just dinners, just talking. I'd stop as soon as I had 3 months of rent saved. I repeated that until it almost sounded true. I messaged the girl, asked if the agency was still looking. She sent me a number. I stared at it for almost an hour before I dialed. When the woman on the other end explained the basics, I interrupted her twice to say I was only interested in the dinner part. She said that was fine. A lot of girls started that way. Then she asked if I wanted to come in and talk. I said yes. The agency sent me the address the day before, a hotel near Ginza, not one of the flashy ones. I took the train and walked the last few blocks with my hands in my coat pockets so no one would see them shaking. The building looked ordinary from the outside. Glass doors, a quiet lobby with soft lighting, and a woman at the front desk who barely looked up when I gave the name they'd told me to use. A man from the agency met me in the lobby. Middle-aged, polite, suit a little too shiny. He checked my phone was off, reminded me of the rules again. Smile, listen, don't ask personal questions, don't drink too much. The client was already upstairs. Dinner first, conversation, then whatever the client wanted after. He said it casually, like it was just another appointment. Then he handed me a small envelope with half the money and told me the rest would come when I finished. The room was on a high floor. When the door opened, the man standing there looked older than I'd expected. Maybe late 40s, tired eyes, expensive watch. He smiled too quickly and asked me to come in. The table was already set with food that looked expensive and cold. He poured wine without asking if I wanted any. We sat. He talked about work, about how lonely the city could feel after long days. I nodded and answered when he paused. My voice sounded thinner than usual. There were long stretches where neither of us said anything. The only sound was the air conditioner and the clink of his glass. I kept noticing small things. The way his tie was slightly crooked, the fact that he'd ordered too much food, how he watched my hands when I moved. At some point, he stood up and said we should move to the other part of the room. I followed. What happened after that is still hard to put into clear words. I remember the lights staying on. I remember staring at a pattern on the wall and counting my breaths. I remember the exact moment it was over, because the silence that followed felt heavier than the talking had. He got dressed first, counted out the rest of the money, and placed it on the table without looking at me. Then he said thank you in a quiet voice and asked if I needed a taxi. I said no. I put the money in my bag, put my coat back on, and left. The hallway smelled like cleaner. The elevator was empty. Downstairs, the same woman at the desk still didn't look up. Outside, the air was cold. I walked to the station instead of taking a cab. On the train home, I sat by the window and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. My face looked the same. My clothes looked the same. But something behind my eyes had shifted, and I knew it wasn't going to shift back. I kept the money in my fist the whole way. Like if I let go of it, the night might somehow not have happened. By the time I reached my stop, I already understood that it had. The money showed up faster than I expected. After a few weeks, the late rent notices stopped. I paid the landlord 3 months ahead, just so I wouldn't have to look at another envelope. Then I sent my mom more than usual and told her I'd gotten a better job at the cafe. She didn't ask questions. I bought a new phone, nicer clothes, the kind of coat I'd only ever looked at through shop windows. For the first time in years, I wasn't doing math every night before bed. Clients started taking me to places I used to walk past, private dining rooms where the menus didn't even list prices, hotels with lobbies that smelled like flowers and money. One man flew me to Osaka for a single dinner because he said the view from that particular restaurant was better. Business class, soft seats, free champagne I barely touched. I sat there watching the clouds and thought, I can't believe this is my life now. The next morning I was back in Tokyo with cash in an envelope and a new pair of shoes I hadn't paid for. Gifts appeared without warning. A watch once, a handbag, tickets to a concert I never would have afforded. Some clients just wanted company at events, charity dinners, private art openings, rooms full of men in suits who spoke quietly and laughed too easily. I learned to smile at the right times and keep my mouth shut the rest. I overheard things, names of companies, who was leaving whose wife, who owed money to whom. No one seemed worried that a quiet girl from Saitama was sitting there listening. The rules of that world were strange. Never ask about their real jobs. Never show up early. Always look like you belong, even when you don't. Some nights felt almost normal, just talking, eating, nodding. Other nights the requests had nothing to do with anything physical. One man wanted me to sit in the corner of his office while he worked late and not say a word. Another paid just to walk through a department store and point at things he should buy for his daughter. I started saying yes to more of those. Every small yes made the next one easier. I moved into a better apartment, still small but clean, with a real kitchen and a window that didn't face a wall. I stopped teaching the drawing classes, stopped checking the cafe schedule. The old life started feeling like something that belonged to someone else. I told myself it was temporary, just until I had enough saved, just until the illustration work took off. But the months kept stacking up, and the folder of drawings on my desk collected dust. There were moments that didn't sit right. A client who got angry when I checked my phone. Another who asked too many questions about where I lived. Nights when the smile on my face felt like it belonged to a different person. I'd come home, take off the expensive clothes, and sit on the floor of my new apartment, staring at the wall. Then the next booking would come in, and the money would be waiting, and I'd push the feeling down again. Somewhere along the way, the two lives stopped being separate. The old one, manga cafe, cheap noodles, worrying about rent, started to feel unreal. This new one, with its hotels and envelopes and quiet rules, became the only one that made sense day to day. Leaving would have meant going back to calculating every yen. Staying meant the numbers finally worked. I didn't notice the exact week it happened. I just woke up one morning and realized this was normal now. The months blurred together after a while. I stopped counting how many nights I'd been out. Daytime became something I slept through. I'd wake up around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, check my phone for the next booking, and start getting ready while the rest of the city was still at work. My old friends from the cafe stopped texting. I stopped answering the ones who did. Birthdays came and went, holidays too. I'd send my mom a message saying I was stuck at work, then delete the conversation afterward so there was no record. Clients changed. Some were almost gentle, older men who just wanted someone to listen while they talked about their kids or their divorces. Others tested boundaries in quieter ways. One man asked me to call him by his real name the entire night and then got quiet when I slipped up. Another wanted me to wear the same dress every time, like I was a character he'd invented. I learned to read a room in under a minute. Who was lonely? Who was angry underneath the politeness? Who might turn strange if the wine kept coming? I started lying without planning it. Stories about a normal office job, a roommate, a boyfriend who traveled a lot. The lies came out so smooth I almost believed them myself. I changed names more than once. Different agencies preferred different ones. Sometimes I forgot which name I was using until the client said it out loud. I carried cash in 3 different places on my body. I deleted every message every night before I went to sleep. I started checking the exits in hotel rooms without thinking about it. Where the stairs were, how long the hallway was, whether the window opened. It became automatic, like locking the door at home used to be. There was a period when the expensive places stopped impressing me. The same hotel lobbies, the same private rooms, the same careful smiles. I'd sit across from someone and nod at the right moments while my mind went somewhere else entirely. One night, a client told me a long story about a business deal that had gone wrong. He cried a little. I handed him a napkin and said the right, soft things. Afterward, I realized I hadn't felt anything at all. Not pity, not discomfort, just the quiet relief that the night was almost over and the money was already in the envelope. Friendships disappeared without big fights. People just faded. My cousin still tried sometimes. She'd message asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I'd invent reasons. Work trip, sick, busy with a project. Once she asked why I never posted anything online anymore. I told her I was taking a break from social media. The truth was, I didn't want anyone seeing where I actually was. I made excuses for things that used to bother me. A client who showed up smelling like he'd been drinking since noon. Another who asked too many questions about my family and then laughed it off. I told myself it was part of the job. Everyone had their quirks. The numbness spread slowly. I stopped noticing when a booking got canceled, and I felt relief instead of disappointment about the lost money. I stopped noticing that I couldn't remember the last time I'd drawn anything. The folder of old sketches stayed closed on a shelf. One evening, I was sitting in a quiet restaurant waiting for a client who was running late. The waiter refilled my water. I watched people at other tables talking and laughing like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a second, I tried to remember what that used to feel like. Just being out with someone because you wanted to, not because an envelope depended on it. The memory wouldn't come clear. It felt like something that had happened to a different person. I checked my phone, smoothed my dress, and smiled when the client finally walked in. By then, it already felt normal. He started small. Messages from numbers I didn't recognize, photos of my building at night. Once I saw him across the street when I came home from a booking, just standing there under a streetlight, like he was waiting for a bus that never came. I told the agency. They said clients get attached sometimes. Just ignore it. Change your route. I did. For a while, it seemed to work. That night, I came back later than usual. The street was quiet. Most of the windows in my building were already dark. I was reaching for my keys when I saw him by the entrance. Not hiding, just standing there like he belonged. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even step closer at first. He said my real name, not the one the agency used, and told me it was time I understood something. From now on, I was his. If I tried to disappear, he would go to Saitama first. He would find my mother. Then he would come for me. I started to answer, to tell him he was wrong, but he held up his phone. The screen lit up the space between us. It was a photo of my younger sister, standing outside her school. Same uniform, same backpack, taken that same day. I could see the timestamp. I could see the corner of the gate I used to walk through when I was her age. He didn't say anything else. He just watched my face while I looked at it. The air went still. Somewhere down the block, a vending machine hummed. A car passed and kept going. I remember the exact weight of my bag on my shoulder and the sound of my own breathing. He put the phone away and told me to go upstairs and think about it. He would be in touch. I didn't go upstairs. I turned around and walked. Not fast, not slow, just away from the building. I went to the small locker I kept at a 24-hour place near the agency, the one where I used to leave a change of clothes. I took the emergency bag I had packed months earlier and never opened, passport, some cash, a spare phone I had never used. I turned my regular phone off and left it on a shelf. Then I walked to the station and bought a ticket for the first night bus, heading as far in the opposite direction as it would go. The city kept moving like nothing had happened. People laughed on the platform. A couple argued quietly about dinner. The bus filled with tired strangers and the doors closed. I sat by the window with the bag on my lap and watched Tokyo slide away into the dark. By the time the bus left the last lights behind, I already knew I could never go back to any version of the life I had been living. I didn't go back. Not that night, not the next week, not ever. The bus took me south and I kept moving. Cheap rooms, different cities, cash only. I changed my phone the first chance I got and never turned the old one on again. I stopped using my real name. For a while, I barely used any name at all. I worked whatever jobs would take me without too many questions. Kitchen help, night cleaning, stocking shelves. The money was nothing compared to before. Some months, I ate mostly convenience store food and counted the days until the next small paycheck. Fear sat with me constantly. Every time a man looked at me too long on the train, I felt my stomach drop. I checked the street before I left any building. I had nightmares about that photo, my sister's face, the school gate, the timestamp. I'd wake up sweating and have to remind myself she was safe, that I had cut every thread that could lead back to her. The guilt didn't care. It told me I had brought this to her door by staying too long. I tried reaching out to my mom once through a complicated chain of messages. She cried. She asked where I was. I couldn't tell her. After that, I kept the contact rare and careful. My cousin still doesn't know the full truth. Some friendships just ended because I disappeared. Others I cut myself. Starting over meant starting alone. The first year, I barely slept through the night. Panic would hit in ordinary places, a crowded supermarket, the sound of a phone vibrating. I saw a counselor for a while through a free clinic. She was patient. I was not a good patient. Talking about it felt like opening a door I had nailed shut. I went to a couple of support meetings and left early both times. Sitting in a circle and saying the words out loud still felt dangerous. Money was tight for a long time. I learned how to live small again. No more nice coats or last-minute train tickets. Just rent, food, and the quiet hope that no one was looking for me. Eventually, I found steady work in a small print shop. The hours are regular. The people are ordinary. Sometimes I take illustration jobs under a different name. Anonymous commissions that never ask for a face or a real identity. It is not the career I once imagined. It is enough to keep the lights on. I am 28 now. I live in a different city under a different name. Most days feel almost normal. Then, something small will catch me. The smell of a certain hotel soap, a man's voice on the phone that sounds too familiar, and I am back at that entrance for a second. I still check exits without thinking. I still delete messages out of habit. Some nights the shame is quieter. Some nights it is not. I do not forgive myself for waiting as long as I did. The photo of my sister is still the clearest picture in my head. Everything after that was just the long work of staying gone. If you are still inside that life, hear me. The moment you understand the danger is real is the moment you have to leave. Waiting only makes the exit harder. I got out. I am still getting out. That is the only true thing I know.